Welcome to Changing the Game, where bold leaders, rule breakers, and trailblazers drop the playbook and share how they lead, win, and shake things up. Hello, my name is Jordan Duran. Today, I'm joined by Jade McCarthy. Jade is a broadcaster and host for SiriusXM, where she brings her expertise and passion for storytelling to sports audiences nationwide. Before joining SiriusXM, Jade built an impressive career in sports media, spending time at ESPN as an anchor and contributing to various New England sports networks. She is also an Emmy Award-winning storyteller, known for her ability to bring powerful narratives to life. Beyond broadcasting, Jade is passionate about resilience, reinvention, and the motivation needed to overcome challenges, lessons she shares through her work as a speaker and consultant. Welcome, Jade.
Thanks, Jordan. It's great to be here. I don't know if I live up to the billing on everything that you just said, but I'm ready to try.
No, I guarantee you do. Jade, I actually listened to you on a podcast recently, and it's obvious that you are a professional storyteller. So I'm very excited to have you share your insights with our audience today.
Well, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So set the stage for us, Jade. I'd love to do a little chronological start. I want to know what you were like growing up and what really created your passion for sports.
So I have to go back to when I was a really little kid. I spent a lot of time with my great aunt, and Auntie Anne was a huge baseball fan, and I grew up in the Boston area, and she begrudgingly became a Red Sox fan. That's what she would tell you with this twinkle in her eye when the Boston Braves left town. So this is going way back, right? But I spent so much time with her as a kid, and I spent a lot of Saturdays with her, and my childhood was listening to baseball games on the radio. I mean, sometimes we would watch them on TV, but a lot of times we would just listen to them on the radio. And I started having a chance to go to a game. I went to my first game when I was 6 years old with her. And I remembered sitting there, in these seats that my mom had got us from the game from someone who went into her barber shop, and we were behind the first base dugout, where the Red Sox are. And I was looking at Jody Reed and Wade Boggs, names that I don't even know if you know, Jordan, but
I don't. I'll be honest.
Wade Boggs was so much taller than Jody Reed, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh my God, just the whole thing. But baseball was my first true love, and just spent so much time watching it, following it. She taught me how to, to make a scorecard and do all those things. And then we always had sports on in my house. Both of my parents, were big sports fans. So I remember learning football from my dad, being I want to understand this game, and how does this work and how does that work? And, we'd watch hockey and basketball and golf and NASCAR. I think my dad was one of the few people in New England who loved NASCAR. And I was like, why do you like this, Dad? I couldn't figure it out. And then, fast forward years later, and a couple different times I had an opportunity to go cover NASCAR and also to drive a car. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, there is so much strategy here. And the way that they, figure out the pit stop and when to pit and this and that. And I just had such an appreciation for it. And I was like, oh, this is what my dad appreciated about this sport for all those years. So I just feel like it was, woven through the fabric of my childhood and has always been a part of my life. And, now in my house, we always have a sporting event on the TV. I don't know any different.
That is so special, Jade. Your childhood, it being interwoven, your relationship with your dad and your aunt, that's just, that's so special. And just the nostalgia of listening to baseball on the radio. I feel like that's kind of lost now in our society of having the radio on and listening to it. And I can remember that from my childhood a little bit too, with my dad in the garage.
Yeah, it's the best, right? I mean, there's something about it that it's so different than any of the other sports, right? Because football, you want to see it. You want to you hear the collision sometimes and you want to see it, and it moves faster. Yes. And, same with hockey, you turn away and you miss a goal. Baseball, you can still hear that back, and you can picture it in your head, like, the ball sailing, and does he leap and make the catch, or is it over the wall? And there's something really special about that.
I totally agree. When was the moment you decided you wanted to be a broadcaster then? Did you know early because you were so invested in sports and listening and watching? When did that moment come for you?
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of things, Jordan. I always knew I wanted to in sports and in writing, but I didn't necessarily know that it was going to be on camera, right? Like, I knew I wanted to go into that world. And then I did an internship when I was in college, and just fell in love with TV, just the production of it and everything that was a part of it. And I had a professor in college who had encouraged me to try TV as opposed to print. And when I did, I was so grateful that she had made the suggestion, because I was like, wow, I love this. And I just felt like, wow, like, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the person who gets to ask the questions. And so, like, that kind of summed it up. I was like, well, if I'm asking the questions, then I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to be on camera. And then, that sort of took me on this journey, and, moved to Alabama when all my friends were moving to New York or Boston after college. People were like, I'm sorry, wait, you're going where? I was like, I'm moving to Alabama. And it was great. I mean, I still have dear friends down there to this day, and wouldn't trade the experiences for anything.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love the story. You going to Alabama and your friends are like, wait, what's going on? What are you doing? And it sounds like you had a really awesome mentor to kind of direct you down this path that would ultimately become your career. Can you walk us through that career journey a little bit? Because it's my understanding you didn't start in sports. Is that correct?
Right. The job I took in Alabama was a news job.
Right.
I was hired as their morning news reporter and then became the weekend news anchor. But I didn't do sports at all down there. And when I was in college in Western Mass, I interned. No, well, I had an opportunity to intern at one station, and I had an opportunity to work the assignment desk at another station. So I figured if I'm going to be working, I might as well get paid for it if I can. So I took the job, and worked my way into doing on-air reporting when I was still in college, which was a tremendous opportunity. And I did news, but I always kind of hung out in the sports department, and I would always read the sports page in the paper. For all you listening, that's basically what you read on your phone these days. But that was just what I would go to so often. And when I was in Philly, I signed with an agent, and he called me one day, and he knew, like, we would talk sports. So he knew that I loved sports and followed sports. And he was like, all right, so I got a call from a station in Philly, and they're looking for someone who can tell stories, but they want someone in their sports department, but they don't want a stats geek. And I was like, okay. So I went and I interviewed for the job. And I remember sitting there with the assistant news director, Dave Parker was his name, and the news director there, Chris Blackman. And they were like, well, do you think you can ask the hard questions in the locker room or in the clubhouse? And I looked at him and I said, well, I don't really see the difference between asking a hard question in a locker room versus asking one in the mayor's office. Like, it's the same thing. I mean,
Right.
Like, being a sound reporter is being a sound reporter. It's knowing your material. It's asking good questions. It's listening to answers and asking good follow-ups. So I got the job in Philly, and then, like, the rest was history. I mean, I have a dear friend who, was in that sports department and was the senior producer in there, and he was like, okay, we're going to keep you really busy with sports stuff. And I did a lot of different things at NBC in Philly. I was kind of a jack of all trades. But I primarily did sports there, and, stayed with that and moved more, I guess, toward that direction after that opportunity in Philadelphia.
That is such a cool story. And Jade, I love how you answered that question. Like, can you ask the hard questions in a locker room? And to you, you're like, there's no difference. Like, what are you talking about? And I love that mentality. I think just relating it to some of the work that I do at Shift Group, I work with a lot of former female athletes and veterans who are stepping into a career path where it is largely male dominated. And we kind of have to deal with or I don't want to say deal, we have to address the fact that, hey, this is a huge opportunity for you. You seeing yourself as maybe one of the only in that space can be a really good thing. And it doesn't really matter, what you look like. It's like, can you ask the hard questions? Can you get the job done? Can you be competitive? Can you be a good teammate? And I love your mentality with that.
Yeah, I think it's so true, and I think it's really important for everybody to remember that you're walking into a role or an opportunity with your own unique set of history, like your own background, your own experiences, and your own lens. And all of that makes you you and can help you to contribute in a different way than anybody else can to that opportunity. And I think that's really important to remember, because a lot of times we look at a position like, oh, I'm hired to do this, and now I'm walking in this person's shoes. But the reality is you can make those shoes what you want them to be. You just have to be willing to make sure that you're getting the job done, obviously, but do it in a way that you're putting your own mark on it that nobody else can.
Yeah, your uniqueness is a superpower.
Yes,
totally.
100%.
I would love to know if you have a pivotal moment in your career covering sports, or is there a moment where you're like, this has been my favorite moment so far, or something fun like that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could pick one favorite one. There's certainly some that I remember and stand out in my mind. Being a girl, Boston born and bred, I remember when the Red Sox won the World Series, and I was hosting SportsCenter the next morning at 9 a.m. And there was something just really special about being able to be there and share in that moment with the audience, and just, like when I remember the first time the Red Sox won the World Series, I was working in Alabama, and my great aunt and I had been talking, and she was older, but still alive then. And she called me, and she was pinching herself, and she was crying, and she was like, I can't believe they actually did it. I mean, she had waited a lifetime for that to happen and had never seen it. And then it finally happened. So for me to sit on that SportsCenter set, and after having seen it happen again and be thinking of her and all those memories, was really special. So that's certainly one. The Phillies won the World Series when I was working there, and that was incredible. Just to have covered that team for a couple of years at that point, and know a lot of the players, and baseball it's unlike any sport, just because it's day in and day out, right? I mean, it's a grind, 162 games plus the postseason. It adds up, and you backtrack all the way to February when it starts. So to be like underneath Citizens Bank Park for that final pitch, and then run out on the field right after, and just see the celebration among the players, and be there for that, and the city, and get to like run the parade route basically down Broad Street in Philly. That was a really special moment. And then I think, Jordan, the other things that I think of that are probably not as obvious, because we all remember championships, right? I mean,
definitely.
From playing sports yourself, right? Like, you remember the big wins. And as a sports fan, you remember your team's championships and those moments. But I think the underrated, if you will, things that I remember are really just people. It's different people that I've had the fortune of meeting, and I always felt that there was this tremendous honor, whether I was at NBC in Philadelphia, or whether I was at Nesson, or whether I was at ESPN, when I was in Alabama, or, Western Massachusetts, like when I had the chance to tell somebody's story, I just felt like there was an honor associated with that. And there's this weight of, well, I want to get this right. I want them to be proud of the story that is being told. And to feel like I'm doing them justice and sharing that story. So I think in that, I feel like I just have been blessed to have met some people with these incredible stories, whether it be a high school coach who's battling cancer but refuses to give up on being there for his players and is coaching through it. Or a dad who, took his special needs son and competed in triathlons because it just brought a smile to his son's face. Those stories that really just kind of reach you in a different place. I always felt really, really blessed to have had the opportunity to share those. And I think those people made an impact on me, more than I ever could have made an impact on sharing their story.
That really is so, I can feel the passion when you talk about it, and it really is so inspiring. And I completely agree. It's all about the people and the impact that we have on other people's lives and honoring their stories. I think that's an amazing guiding principle in your career. And this is kind of actually a very good segue, because one thing I did want to ask you about today was, as we were emailing back and forth, I did notice your email signature said "with love and intention," right? And I thought that was so cool, because it really does. I think it's a compass for your interactions, even just over email. And so I'd love to know where that comes from. It sounds like it is a guiding principle for you, but what inspired that, and where does it come from?
Yeah, so that's kind of just a funny story. I had a podcast for a while that I was doing with Sports Spectrum, which is a group at the intersection of sports and faith. And a longtime ESPN producer, brought me in there, and really enjoyed those podcasts and those conversations. You can still find them if you want to check them out. It's Transformed with Jade McCarthy, and wherever you find your podcasts. But as we were developing the podcast and talking about it, we were sort of like recording the early goings of one, and Jason Romano, the producer, said to me, he was like, "I feel like you need a sign off." And I was like, okay. And it just came to me. I mean, I just sort of said, "Live with love and intention. Until next time, I'm Jade McCarthy." And he just kind of stared at me like over the Zoom that we were recording on. And he was like, "Have you been thinking about that?" And I was like, "No, it just occurred to me." Like, it just honestly was there. And I've just, since that day, I've never let it go. I made it my signature on my emails, and I ended on my podcast that way. And I say it to people all the time. And it's funny. I mean, even the administrator at my daughter's elementary school was like, she'll write me back and be like, "I love your signature." People say to me all the time. But I think it's so true, because there's something to be said about living in a manner in which, we're loving towards others and towards ourselves, and we do it intentionally. And so just, I think for me, every moment to be able to share that idea is an opportunity that I'm not willing to pass up on.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously you are a very faith-filled person. So I'd love to know how your faith has influenced your career decisions, or maybe some of your personal growth throughout your career journey.
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's just this belief that it'll work out. Nothing is linear, right? And life is certainly not linear, and opportunities aren't linear, and the way in which we grow isn't linear. And so for me, I think it's just having this sense of peace, that when things are meant to happen, they will. And everybody believes in that in a different way. I mean, I believe that there's no such thing as coincidence, and God is in charge, and there's bad things in the world, but those aren't his doing. But he will have the final say. And that gives me comfort. But everybody's different, and I'm okay with that. I meet people where they are.
Yeah.
But if I have that opportunity to be loving and to do it with a positive intention and meet somebody there, again, that's just not something that I'm going to pass up on.
Yeah. Jade, I love that. Thank you for sharing that with the audience. I think I'm right there with you. And I think whatever it is, that your guiding principle is, it's like leading with love and intention. And that's the energy you put out into the world. And I just think it's so inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. I'd also like to learn a little bit more about how you balance a demanding career, being a wife, a mother, tell us a little bit about that. I have listeners, candidates that I work with at Shift Group that are experiencing the same thing. How do I balance having career goals with being a mom or being a parent? So I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is there's no such thing as balance.
Yeah.
You can't possibly balance everything. And so I think it comes in waves, right? And part of it is just this recognition of, well, I have to have help, right? I mean, you can't, like, no mom, wife, employee, business owner, like whatever hat you put on, like nobody can do it all on their own. There's a reason that there's the expression, it takes a village. It does take a village. And I think that that's true for, raising kids. I think it's true for careers, like everything, because, you said to me before, it seemed like you had a mentor who helped to lead you in the direction of television. And I think that's so true for life. I mean, we all have to have mentors, and really multiple mentors, because they're for different aspects of our lives, right? I mean, who you call when your toddler is making you lose your mind is probably not the same person that you might call when you are trying to decide if you should accept a promotion, or,
right.
And maybe there's overlap sometimes, but I think it helps to have multiple mentors who have, walked that path before you. And then on the flip side, to have people that you're willing to mentor, right? Because we can all learn from each other. And, I would be the first to say, there's I learn stuff from my kids now. And I mean, there's plenty of people who are younger than me in the industry that I learn from. And I think it's important to do both, right? To have somebody who can be a leader to you, and then also be a leader to somebody else, and be open to that, and be willing to be that on both sides, and be a sponge, right? My dad always used to say that, just be a sponge, like be willing to soak up everything that people are willing to share with you, that you can then, release back out in a positive way. So I think that's certainly part of it. It's just having that mentality, because it does help with the many, many hats that all of us have to wear on a daily basis.
I 100% agree with that. I think you can really learn from anybody. So being a sponge is so important. You're not, everybody has a story to share, or some piece of wisdom that they can give you. I'm right there with you on that. How would you encourage maybe some younger candidates going into the workforce, maybe for the first time, they don't know where to start? How would you tell them to start developing relationships, or those mentorship type of relationships?
Yeah, I think number one is just start. I know that sounds silly, but just start, reach out, talk to people, recognize that you have something to offer. And I think that's really important. And then be open, be willing to be a sponge, ask questions, be curious. I mean, I feel like I look at my kids, right? And they're so curious about everything. And I think that is such an important trait for all of us as people, no matter what age we are, is to continue to be curious and be a lifelong learner. That's something that I just believe to be so important. And people that I've worked with over the years and seen, have a lot of success, whether it's, professionally or personally, I would tell you that most of them are really curious, and they always want to be growing, right? That growth mindset that I feel like has been a buzzword for the past, 5-10 years now. I think it's so true. I mean, you have to have that desire to continue to learn and grow and challenge yourself, because that will pay dividends. Like, as you may have been the best at X, and now you're embarking on the next phase of your career or your life. I mean, there's so many different transitions that we all go through as people. And I think that willingness to say, yeah, I did this really well, but I want to learn to do this really well.
Yeah.
Or, like, can you teach me this part of it? Or can you help me understand this? And then take that and marry it with the experiences that you've already had. And that's where you get that unique lens that we can all bring to the table.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that advice. I know we only have a couple more minutes left, so I do have just 2 questions that I want to get to before we wrap up. I would just love to know, with your experience, how do you see the future of sports and broadcasting evolving, especially with the rise of, new digital media and podcasting? How do you see things evolving?
Yeah, I think it's been evolving rapidly. Even just in the past couple of years, things have changed, right? I mean, I feel like I've had so many different conversations with even NFL teams, right? Who, they have these like social media departments now that they never used to have. And they have, dozens of people in them running their media, and they put out these, great different stories and vignettes. And, the Patriots obviously had one a few years ago with the Good Will Hunting spoof that they did. And the Chargers social media game has been strong for a long time. Obviously, the Super Bowl champs this year, the Eagles, like, theirs was terrific. And I just think, I mean, that's just one example of sort of this new wave of the media world that we're in. I mean, that didn't even exist just a couple of years back. I don't know that the change is going to slow any. Yeah. I think it's just going to continue. I do think that the one thing that we can all bank on is that live sports are still the biggest draw.
Yep.
And all you have to do is look at rights fees to know that that's a reality. And, to look at Amazon and Apple and Netflix all trying to find a way to get into that part of the game, because there's just built-in guaranteed audience there, especially with a couple sports that I probably don't even have to name, and you already know.
Right. Yeah, 100%. The change isn't slowing, but yeah, it's still the major pull for sure.
Yeah.
One last question for you before we get going here. I would love to know just what advice you have for aspiring broadcasters looking to make their mark in the industry. And the show was founded on the premise of helping women break into sales. It's since expanded, but I would like to know, additionally to that, like, is there any advice you have for young women wanting to pursue careers in this space?
Yeah, I think do it. It's the same thing that your coach told you, when you're playing basketball or playing volleyball or lacrosse or baseball or, name the sport. It's reps, right? It's and it's muscle memory. So when you step out onto that court, you don't have to think, you just do. And I think the broadcast space is very much the same, because you can't be thinking, okay, how do I do this? And what do I do here? And what if this happens? Because it's all going to happen too fast, just like it does in a game. And so the more you can practice and the more reps you can have, the better. I've said this to young broadcasters who have asked me before, I'm like, practice writing scripts and sit in front of a Zoom or sit in front of a mirror and just do it and do it and do it again. You can tell the difference when someone is reading something or when someone is speaking in a more colloquial manner.
Yeah.
And it's comfort, right? I mean, that's a huge part of it. So you got to find ways to practice that independently. And then talk to people. Relationships are a superpower. So, put yourself out there and be willing to tell people what you want to do and why you want to do it, and say, I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. Is there a way that you can help me?
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way.
Thank you so much, Jade. That was amazing advice. I'm so grateful for your time today, and I know our listeners are too. Where can they connect with you? Can I encourage them to follow you on LinkedIn? Are there any other channels that you'd like to push into your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, certainly LinkedIn. You can find me there. I also have a website, jademccarthy.com, and you can connect with me through there. There's a connect page if you're interested in having me speak or just chat with you about your own personal goals, professional goals. Please reach out there, and I'm sure we can find a way to be in touch.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. This was so wonderful. Thank you to our listeners, and we will chat with you all soon.